My name is Sophia Bennett, 32 years old, and I'm the CEO of a renewable energy company with a net worth of approximately $250 million. From the outside, my life might seem like a fairy tale, the brilliant entrepreneur who conquered the business world against all odds. But let me tell you something about fairy tales. They're built on the bones of broken children. Every success story has its shadows, and mine began with the kind of betrayal that shapes a soul forever. When I was 8 years old, my world didn't just change, it shattered into 1,000 pieces that I'm still finding embedded in my heart. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved most, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're ready to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of manipulation. It was a deceptively beautiful October day in 2001, the kind where nature puts on its finest show while your life falls apart. My parents drove me through the winding roads of Vermont like they were taking me on a pleasant family trip, not delivering me to exile. The autumn leaves blazed red and gold around us, mocking the darkness that was about to consume my childhood. They chatted casually about the weather, the scenery, anything except what they were really doing, abandoning their only child like an unwanted package. My mother, Rachel, clutched my hand with the desperate grip of someone trying to convince herself she wasn't committing an unforgivable act. Her palm was sweaty, trembling slightly, and every few steps she would squeeze tighter as if she could somehow transfer her guilt into my small fingers. My father, David, trudged behind us carrying my pitiful little purple suitcase, the same one I'd used for sleepovers at friends' houses, never imagining it would become the vessel for my entire displaced life. His face was carved from stone, a practiced mask of indifference that couldn't quite hide the shame lurking in his eyes. I remember thinking how strange it was that they couldn't look at me directly. These people who had created me, who had sung me lullabies and bandaged my scraped knees, now treated me like a burden too heavy to bear. The cottage ahead looked quaint and welcoming, with its weathered shingles and smoke curling from the chimney, but to my 8-year-old mind it might as well have been a prison. I was being sentenced to a life among strangers, and my crime was simply existing at an inconvenient time. "Grandma Elena will take good care of you, sweetheart," my mother whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice under pressure. The endearment felt hollow, a cheap consolation prize for the daughter they were discarding. "Mommy and Daddy need to sort some things out." What kind of things required throwing away your child? I was too young to understand the full scope of their failures, the legal troubles, the financial ruin, the complete moral bankruptcy that had led them to this moment. All I knew was that I had somehow become the problem that needed to be solved by my removal. "When will you come back?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Even at 8, I understood that this question carried the weight of my entire future. "Soon, baby." "Very soon," she lied with the practiced ease of someone who had probably been lying to herself for months. Her eyes darted away from mine, focusing on some distant point beyond my shoulder. In that moment, I learned my first lesson about the adult world. Words mean nothing when actions tell a different story. The door opened before we could knock. My grandmother stood there, a tall, elegant woman in her 70s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes the same deep blue as mine. She wore a simple cardigan over a floral dress, and her hands, though aged, looked strong and capable. "Hello, little one," she said gently, kneeling down to my level. "I'm your Grandma Elena. I've been waiting to spend time with you." My parents exchanged hurried words with her, words I couldn't quite catch but that seemed urgent and hushed. Then, before I could fully process what was happening, they were gone. Their car disappeared down the winding road, leaving me standing in the doorway of a stranger's house, clutching a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Buttons. The first night was the hardest. Grandma Elena showed me to a small bedroom on the second floor. It had sloped ceilings, white lace curtains, and a view of the garden where wildflowers grew in cheerful chaos. She had prepared the room with care. There were books on the nightstand, a soft quilt on the bed, and even a small desk by the window. "This is your room now, Sophia," she said softly. "For as long as you need it." That phrase, "as long as you need it," suggested something my 8-year-old mind wasn't ready to accept. I lay awake that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, waiting for the sound of my parents' car returning. But all I heard was the gentle hooting of owls and the whisper of wind through the trees. Days turned into weeks, and slowly I began to understand that my parents weren't coming back, at least not anytime soon. Grandma Elena never pressed me with questions or false reassurances. Instead, she simply existed beside me, a steady presence in my suddenly unstable world. She was different from anyone I'd ever known. Every morning, she woke before dawn to tend her garden, her hands working the soil with practiced grace. She taught me the names of plants and flowers, showing me how to coax life from seeds. "Patience and care," she would say, her voice carrying a slight accent that hinted at her European heritage. "That's all most living things need to flourish." In the afternoons, we would sit in her study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books, where sunlight streamed through tall windows and dust motes danced like tiny stars. It was there that I discovered her secret. My grandmother wasn't just a retired teacher, as I'd assumed. She was a brilliant scientist, a former biochemist who had spent decades researching renewable energy solutions. The study was filled with scientific journals, technical diagrams, and prototypes of solar panels and wind turbines. She had notebooks filled with her own research, written in her precise handwriting. When she noticed my curiosity, she began to explain her work in terms an 8-year-old could understand. "You see, Sophia," she said one afternoon, holding up a small solar panel, "the sun gives us energy every day completely free. My job was to figure out how to catch that energy and use it to power our homes." I watched in fascination as she demonstrated how the panel could power a small light bulb. The concept seemed like magic to me, invisible energy from the sun becoming visible light in our hands. "Can you teach me?" I asked, my natural curiosity overcoming my sadness for the first time since my arrival. Her face lit up with joy. "I would love nothing more." From that day forward, my real education began. Grandma Elena taught me about science not through textbooks, but through hands-on experiments in her makeshift laboratory in the basement. We built simple circuits, grew crystals, and studied the behavior of light and energy. She taught me to question everything, to observe carefully, and to think logically. But more than science, she taught me about resilience. When I cried myself to sleep missing my parents, she would sit beside my bed, stroking my hair and singing old lullabies in what I later learned was Romanian. When I had nightmares about being abandoned again, she would hold me until the fear passed. "Strong trees grow in strong winds, little one," she would whisper. "This pain you feel, it's not pleasant, but it's making you stronger than you know." Months passed and my parents made sporadic contact. A phone call here, a birthday card there, always with promises to visit soon that never materialized. Each broken promise was like a small wound, but Grandma Elena helped me understand that their absence said nothing about my worth as a person. "Some people," she explained one evening as we watched the sunset from her garden, "get lost in their own storms. It doesn't mean they don't love you, but it means they can't give you what you need right now." When I was 10, I learned the truth about why my parents had left me. It came out during one of their rare phone calls when my mother, perhaps thinking I couldn't hear, spoke in hushed tones to Grandma Elena about their financial troubles and legal issues. They were being investigated for tax fraud, and leaving me with my grandmother had been as much about protecting me from the fallout as it had been about their inability to care for me properly. The revelation was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it confirmed my worst fears, that I had been abandoned. Liberating because it meant the abandonment wasn't really about me at all. As I grew older, my passion for science deepened. Grandma Elena enrolled me in advanced classes and science camps. She encouraged me to enter science fairs, where my projects on renewable energy began to win recognition. By the time I was 14, I had built a small wind turbine that could power our garden lights, and a solar cooker that we used for camping trips. "You have a gift, Sophia," she told me one afternoon as we worked together in her lab. "But more than that, you have purpose. The world needs young minds like yours to solve its biggest problems." It was around this time that I learned about my grandmother's past. She had fled Romania in the 1960s, leaving behind everything she knew to pursue her education in America. She had worked twice as hard as her male colleagues to earn recognition in the scientific community, eventually becoming one of the leading researchers in renewable energy before retiring early to care for my ailing grandfather, who had passed away when I was too young to remember him. "I gave up my career for love," she told me, "and I don't regret it. But I want you to know that you don't have to choose between love and ambition. You can have both, but you must be willing to work for both." My teenage years were a blur of academic achievement and growing confidence. I excelled in math and science, but Grandma Elena insisted I also study literature, history, and languages. "A well-rounded mind," she said, "is a powerful tool." When I was 16, she helped me apply for early admission to MIT. The application process was rigorous, but she guided me through it with the same patience she had shown when teaching me to garden years earlier. When my acceptance letter arrived, we both cried, tears of joy and pride and gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. But even as I prepared to leave for college, I struggled with guilt about leaving her alone. She was in her 80s now, and though still sharp and energetic, she was beginning to show her age. "Don't you dare feel guilty about living your life," she scolded me gently. "This is exactly what I've been preparing you for. Go, learn, grow, and change the world. That's how you honor what we've built together." At MIT, I threw myself into my studies with the intensity she had taught me. I majored in environmental engineering with a focus on renewable energy systems. My professors quickly recognized my passion and aptitude, and I was invited to join research projects typically reserved for graduate students. The transition to college life was both exhilarating and challenging. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by peers who shared my intellectual curiosity and scientific passion. Yet despite this stimulating environment, I struggled with the social aspects of college life. The dormitory parties felt foreign and overwhelming, the casual friendships seemed superficial compared to the deep bond one shared with Grandma Elena. My roommate Jessica was a bubbly pre-med student from California who initially tried to include me in social activities. She would invite me to study groups, movie nights, and weekend trips to Boston. But I often declined, preferring to spend my free time in the laboratory or library. Jessica meant well, but her easy confidence and large circle of friends only highlighted my own social awkwardness. "You're brilliant, Sophia," she told me one evening as I worked on a thermodynamics problem set while she got ready for a party. "But you need to learn to have fun too. College isn't just about grades." I appreciated her concern, but fun felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Every moment spent socializing was a moment not spent learning, not spent working toward the goals Grandma Elena and I had set. Besides, years of abandonment had left me with deep-seated trust issues. I found it difficult to form close friendships, always waiting for the inevitable moment when people would leave. I buried myself in my studies and research, finding solace in the predictability of scientific principles. My professors noticed my dedication and began offering me opportunities that typically went to graduate students. Professor Martinez, who taught my renewable energy systems course, invited me to join his research team during my freshman year. We were working on improving the efficiency of perovskite solar cells, a cutting-edge technology that could revolutionize the solar industry. "You have an intuitive understanding of these systems that I rarely see in undergraduates," he told me after I had presented a novel approach to reducing degradation in the cells. "Have you considered pursuing graduate research early?" The possibility excited me, but it also meant even more time in the lab and less time building the social connections that seemed to come so naturally to my peers. I called Grandma Elena that night to discuss the opportunity. "Take it," she said without hesitation. "But remember, brilliant minds need diverse experiences to reach their full potential. Don't isolate yourself completely, little one." Her advice proved prescient when I met David Chen, a graduate student in the materials science department who was also working on Professor Martinez's research team. David was 3 years older than me, quiet and methodical in his approach to research, but with a dry sense of humor that gradually drew me out of my shell. Unlike my other classmates, David didn't push me to attend parties or join clubs. Instead, he invited me to join him for quiet dinners at a small Vietnamese restaurant near campus, where we would discuss our research over bowls of pho. He introduced me to classical music concerts at Symphony Hall and art exhibits at the Museum of Fine Arts, cultural experiences that fed my soul without overwhelming my social anxieties. You know, he said one evening as we walked through the museum's contemporary art wing, there's something beautiful about the way you see patterns in everything. You look at a painting and start explaining the physics of color theory. You hear music and analyze the mathematical relationships between the notes. I felt myself blush, uncertain whether he was teasing me or complimenting me. Is that weird? It's fascinating, he replied simply. You see connections that others miss. That's a gift. Through David, I began to understand that my analytical nature wasn't a social handicap. It was part of who I was, and the right people would appreciate it rather than merely tolerate it. This realization helped me open up slightly to other relationships, though I remained selective about who I trusted with my friendship. It was during my sophomore year that I received the call that changed everything. Grandma Elena had suffered a stroke and was in the hospital. I dropped everything and rushed back to Vermont, my heart pounding with fear of losing the only person who had ever truly been there for me. I found her in a hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. But her mind was still sharp, and when she saw me, her face lit up with that familiar warm smile. "My brilliant girl," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, fighting back tears. "You're my grandmother. You're my everything." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Listen to me carefully, Sophia. I have things to tell you, and I need you to promise me something." Over the next few days, as she recovered slowly but steadily, she revealed secrets she had kept for years. She told me about the patents she held for various renewable energy technologies, patents that were worth millions. She told me about the foundation she had established years earlier to fund environmental research, and about the substantial inheritance she planned to leave me. "But money isn't the real inheritance," she said seriously. "The real inheritance is what you do with your life. Promise me you'll use your gifts to make the world better." I promised, though I couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of what she was telling me. At 19, millions of dollars was an abstract concept. What mattered to me was that she was going to be okay. She recovered from the stroke, but it was a turning point. We both knew that our time together was precious and limited. I arranged to complete my degree through a combination of online courses and research projects that allowed me to spend more time with her in Vermont. For the next 2 years, we worked together more intensively than ever before. She taught me not just about science, but about business, about managing people, about the practical aspects of turning research into real-world solutions. We traveled together to conferences and research facilities, where she introduced me to a network of scientists, entrepreneurs, and investors. "You're not just learning to be a scientist," she explained. "You're learning to be a leader. The world has plenty of smart people. What it needs are smart people who can inspire others and make things happen." During this period, my parents made sporadic attempts to reconnect. They had resolved their legal troubles and seemed to want to rebuild our relationship. But their efforts felt hollow to me, motivated more by guilt than genuine love. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA, while Grandma Elena was family in every way that mattered. When I graduated from MIT summa cum laude at 21, Grandma Elena was in the front row, beaming with pride. That evening, at my graduation dinner, she gave me a gift that would become my most treasured possession, a simple silver pendant on a delicate chain. The pendant was shaped like a small sun, with the word hope engraved on the back. "This belonged to my grandmother," she told me, fastening the clasp around my neck. "She gave it to me when I left Romania, and her grandmother gave it to her. It's been passed down through generations of strong women who refused to let circumstances define them." I wore the pendant every day from that moment forward, feeling its weight as a reminder of the legacy I carried and the responsibility that came with it. After graduation, I threw myself into research and entrepreneurship. Using the knowledge Grandma Elena had given me and the connections she had helped me build, I founded a startup focused on developing more efficient solar panel technology. The work was challenging and often frustrating, but I was driven by her words. The world needs young minds like yours to solve its biggest problems. The early days of Aurora Energy Solutions were a crucible of determination and near-constant failure. I had rented a small industrial space in Burlington, Vermont, close enough to visit Grandma Elena regularly, but far enough from MIT to establish my independence. The facility was little more than a concrete shell with basic electrical hookups, but it was mine. My initial team consisted of just 3 people: myself, David Chen, who had followed me from MIT after completing his graduate degree, and Sarah Kim, a brilliant engineer I had met at a renewable energy conference. We worked 18-hour days, surviving on takeout food and endless cups of coffee, driven by the shared belief that we could revolutionize solar energy efficiency. Our first breakthrough came after 8 months of seemingly endless failures. We had been experimenting with a new type of anti-reflective coating that could increase the amount of sunlight absorbed by solar cells. After hundreds of iterations, we finally developed a coating that increased efficiency by 3.2%, a modest improvement that nonetheless represented a significant advancement in the field. I called Grandma Elena immediately after confirming our results. "We did it," I said, my voice shaking with exhaustion and excitement. "The coating works." "I never doubted you would," she replied, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "Your grandfather would have been so proud. He always said that persistence was the most important quality in an inventor." That first success led to our first round of venture capital funding. The process was grueling, dozens of presentations to skeptical investors who questioned everything from our technology to my age and experience. Many of them seemed more interested in the fact that I was a young woman in a male-dominated field than in the actual merits of our innovation. "You're impressive," one investor told me after a particularly challenging presentation, "but do you really think you can scale this technology? Building a company requires different skills than conducting research." The condescension in his tone made my blood boil, but I had learned from Grandma Elena to channel anger into determination. "With respect, sir, I didn't spend 4 years at MIT and 2 years developing this technology to hand it over to someone else to scale. I'm not just the inventor, I'm the CEO." We eventually secured funding from a firm that specialized in clean technology startups. The lead partner, Margaret Walsh, was a former engineer herself who understood both the technical challenges we faced and the market opportunity we represented. "I'm betting on you because you remind me of myself 30 years ago," she told me over dinner after finalizing the investment. "Smart, determined, and absolutely refusing to take no for an answer. But remember, taking investment money means you now have partners. Listen to advice even when you don't want to hear it." With funding secured, we began the complex process of scaling our production. We hired additional engineers, moved to a larger facility, and began the lengthy process of obtaining the certifications necessary to bring our products to market. Each step forward seemed to reveal 10 new challenges, but the team's dedication never wavered. David proved invaluable during this period, not just as a technical contributor but as an emotional anchor. When the stress of running a company began to take its toll on my health and relationships, he was the one who reminded me to eat, to sleep, and to occasionally step outside the laboratory. "You're brilliant," he told me one evening after I had snapped at a supplier over a delayed shipment, "but you're also human. Even Grandma Elena takes breaks." He was right, of course. In my drive to succeed, I had been neglecting the very relationships that made success meaningful. That weekend, instead of working, David and I drove to Grandma Elena's house for a long overdue visit. We spent the afternoon in her garden, helping her harvest tomatoes and listening to her stories about the early days of her own research career. "Building something meaningful takes time," she reminded me as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Don't sacrifice your health or your happiness for speed. The world will wait for quality." My company, Aurora Energy Solutions, grew slowly but steadily. We developed several breakthrough technologies that significantly improved the efficiency of solar energy conversion. Our anti-reflective coating was just the beginning. We also created new photovoltaic cell designs that performed better in low-light conditions and developed energy storage systems that could store solar power more efficiently. Each innovation brought new challenges. We had to navigate complex patent laws, defend our intellectual property against larger competitors, and constantly prove ourselves in a market dominated by established players. There were months when we came close to running out of money, quarters when major deals fell through at the last minute, and countless nights when I wondered if I was in over my head. By the time I was 25, we had secured major contracts with utility companies and were expanding internationally. But success came with its own challenges. As my company grew and my personal wealth increased, my parents' interest in reconnecting intensified. They began reaching out more frequently, expressing pride in my achievements and hinting at their own financial difficulties. I was torn between anger at their opportunistic timing and a deep childlike longing for their approval. Grandma Elena, now in her late 80s but still mentally sharp, helped me navigate these complex emotions. "You don't owe them anything," she said bluntly one afternoon as we sat in her garden. "But you don't owe them your anger either. Forgive them for your own peace, but don't forget the lessons their absence taught you." When I was 27, Grandma Elena's health began to decline more noticeably. She had developed heart problems, and though she tried to hide it from me, I could see the toll it was taking on her energy and vitality. I moved back to Vermont full-time, running my company remotely and spending every possible moment with her. During these final years together, our relationship deepened even further. She shared stories about her childhood in Romania, about her early years in America, about the grandfather I had never known. She told me about the discrimination she had faced as a woman in science, about the doors that had been closed to her, and about her determination to ensure that such doors would be open for me. "I lived my life so that you could live yours," she said one evening as we watched the sunset from her favorite spot in the garden. "That's what love is, clearing the path for the next generation to go further than you ever could." On a cold February morning in 2020, when I was 28, Grandma Elena passed away peacefully in her sleep. I found her in the morning, looking serene and at peace, a slight smile on her lips as if she were having a pleasant dream. The grief was overwhelming. For 20 years she had been my anchor, my guide, my source of strength. Without her, I felt untethered, lost in a way I hadn't experienced since that first night she had taken me in. But even in death, she continued to teach me. Her will revealed the full extent of her wealth and the careful planning she had done to ensure her legacy would continue. In addition to leaving me her house, her research, and a substantial financial inheritance, she had established detailed plans for a foundation that would provide scholarships and support for young women pursuing careers in STEM fields. The foundation, which she had named Hope's Light after the pendant she had given me, was her final gift to the world, and her final lesson to me about the responsibility that comes with privilege and opportunity. My parents, of course, appeared at the funeral. They offered condolences and support, but I could see the calculation in their eyes as they assessed the situation. They had read about my business success in the papers, and they clearly hoped that grief might make me more receptive to rekindling our relationship. I was polite but distant. The years had given me perspective on their abandonment, and while I no longer felt the raw pain of childhood rejection, I also felt no obligation to pretend we were a happy family. A week after the funeral, they asked to meet with me privately. We sat in a local diner, the conversation awkward and strained. They spoke about regret and missed opportunities, about wanting to be part of my life going forward. But when the conversation turned to the inheritance and my business, their true motivations became clear. "We know you've done well for yourself, Sophia," my father said, his tone carefully casual. "And we're proud of you. But families should support each other. We've had some setbacks recently, and we were hoping." I cut him off before he could finish. "Let me stop you right there," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You forfeited any claim to family support when you abandoned an 8-year-old child. I don't owe you anything, not my money, not my success, and certainly not my gratitude." My mother tried to interrupt, tears forming in her eyes. "Sophia, we know we made mistakes, but..." "Mistakes?" I stood up, my composure finally cracking. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to prioritize your own problems over your child's needs. You chose to let someone else raise your daughter. Those weren't mistakes, they were decisions. I left money on the table for my coffee and walked out. That was the last time I spoke to them directly. Over the next few years, I threw myself into building both my company and the foundation. Aurora Energy Solutions continued to grow, developing new technologies and expanding into new markets. We went public when I was 30, making me one of the youngest female CEOs of a major renewable energy company. But the foundation was where I found my deepest satisfaction. We provided scholarships for young women in STEM, funded research into renewable energy technologies, and created mentorship programs connecting established professionals with the next generation of innovators. Every scholarship recipient reminded me of myself at their age, brilliant, determined, but needing someone to believe in them and provide opportunities. Through the foundation, I was able to be for them what Grandma Elena had been for me. One recipient in particular touched my heart deeply. Maria Santos was a 16-year-old from a low-income family in California who had designed an innovative water purification system for her science fair. Like me, she had been raised primarily by her grandmother after her parents had struggled with addiction and ultimately abandoned their responsibilities. When I met Maria at the scholarship ceremony, I saw myself 20 years earlier. The same hunger for knowledge, the same determination to prove herself, the same vulnerability hidden beneath a facade of strength. I decided to take a more personal role in her mentorship, something I had never done before. "You remind me of someone I once knew," I told her that day, touching the sun pendant at my throat. "Someone who taught me that our circumstances don't define us, our choices do." Working with Maria and other scholarship recipients helped heal something in me that I hadn't realized was still wounded. By nurturing their potential, I was honoring not just Grandma Elena's memory, but also the scared little girl I had once been. As my company and the foundation continued to grow, I began to receive recognition for my work. I was invited to speak at conferences, featured on magazine covers, and honored with various awards for innovation and philanthropy. The recognition was gratifying, but what mattered most to me was the tangible impact of our work. Aurora Energy Solutions had helped reduce carbon emissions by millions of tons through our more efficient solar technologies. Hope's Light had provided scholarships to over 500 young women and funded research that led to breakthrough discoveries in renewable energy. We were making the world better, just as Grandma Elena had always believed we could. But success also brought unwanted attention from my parents. As my public profile grew, they began reaching out through intermediaries, family friends, distant relatives, even lawyers. They claimed they wanted to reconcile, to be part of my life, to make amends for their past mistakes. Their persistence was both annoying and painful. Part of me, the part that would always be that 8-year-old girl craving her parents' love, wanted to believe their expressions of regret were genuine. But the adult I had become recognized the pattern. They only sought reconciliation when they perceived something to gain from it. The breaking point came when they hired a publicist and began giving interviews about their estranged daughter and their desire to heal the family wounds. They painted themselves as reformed people who had learned from their mistakes and just wanted a chance to know the remarkable woman their daughter had become. I was furious at their presumption and their manipulation of the media narrative. But I was also hurt. Even in their attempts at reconciliation, they were more concerned with their own image and needs than with my feelings or boundaries. I decided to address the situation head-on. I arranged for a private meeting with them, mediated by my lawyer. We met in a conference room in Burlington, Vermont, neutral territory that held no emotional significance for any of us. They came prepared with apologies and explanations, with tears and protestations of love. But I came prepared with questions. "If you truly regret abandoning me," I asked, "then why did you wait until I was successful to try to reconnect? Why was there no attempt at contact during my struggling college years, or when I was starting my company and failing more often than I succeeded?" They stumbled over their answers, offering excuses about not knowing how to reach me, about being ashamed of their past actions, about wanting to wait until they had turned their lives around. And what about Grandma Elena? I continued. Did you ever thank her for raising your child? Did you ever offer to help with my expenses, or ask how I was doing, or show any interest in my life beyond what you could gain from it? The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, I stood up and delivered the speech I had been preparing for years. I want you to understand something, I began, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. The woman I am today, my success, my strength, my values, none of that came from you. It came from a woman who chose to love me when you chose to abandon me. It came from 20 years of hard work, education, and determination that you played no part in. I paused, looking directly at each of them. You don't get to claim credit for my achievements, and you don't get to suddenly become my family just because it's convenient for you now. My mother started to cry and my father looked stricken. But I wasn't finished. However, I continued, I also won't let your abandonment define me anymore. I'm successful and happy and surrounded by people who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. I don't need your approval or your presence in my life. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. This is a cashier's check for $50,000. Consider it payment for the 8 years you supported me before you left. We're even now. Don't contact me again. I left the conference room feeling lighter than I had in years. I had finally closed that chapter of my life, not with bitterness or anger, but with the kind of strength and grace that Grandma Elena had always embodied. Today, as I sit in my office overlooking the green hills of Vermont, the same hills I once thought were so foreign and frightening, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. Aurora Energy Solutions has become a global leader in renewable energy technology, with facilities on 4 continents and a valuation approaching $500 million. Hope's Light has grown into one of the most respected educational foundations in the country, having provided opportunities for thousands of young women who might otherwise have never had the chance to pursue their dreams. Our latest facility in Costa Rica represents everything Grandma Elena taught me about sustainable development. Built entirely with renewable energy and employing over 300 local workers, it produces some of the most efficient solar panels in the world while also serving as a training center for young engineers from across Latin America. When I visited last month for the facility's grand opening, I was moved to tears watching Maria Santos, now 22, and our youngest project manager, lead a team of engineers in testing our newest photovoltaic technology. You know, Maria said to me as we walked through the production floor, when I first met you, I never imagined I'd be standing here. This scholarship didn't just change my life, it changed my family's life, my community's future. That's when I truly understood what Grandma Elena had meant about legacy. It's not just about the money or the business success, it's about the ripple effects of opportunity, the way one person's investment in another can transform entire communities. The foundation has evolved far beyond what either Grandma Elena or I originally envisioned. In addition to scholarships, we now operate 3 residential programs for young women who have aged out of foster care, providing them with housing, education, and mentorship as they transition to independence. We've also established partnerships with universities worldwide, creating exchange programs that bring promising students to our Vermont facility for intensive research experiences. Last year, we launched our newest initiative, the Grandmother's Workshop. It's a program that pairs experienced female engineers and scientists with middle school girls who have shown aptitude in STEM subjects. The mentors work with the girls over the course of 3 years, providing not just academic support, but also the kind of personal guidance that Grandma Elena gave me. The name came to me one afternoon as I was cleaning out her old laboratory. I found a notebook where she had sketched out ideas for educational programs, ideas she never had the chance to implement. Among her notes, I found a quote she had written, "Every girl deserves a grandmother who believes in her potential." That became the motto for the program. But perhaps the most meaningful aspect of my work now is the research collaboration I've established with MIT. David, who is now my husband, we married 3 years ago in a small ceremony in Grandma Elena's garden, leads a joint research initiative between Aurora Energy Solutions and his laboratory at the university. Together, we're working on next-generation energy storage systems that could make renewable energy viable even in the most remote parts of the world. Our marriage had been a long time coming. David had been patient with my trust issues, understanding that my reluctance to commit wasn't about him, but about my deep-seated fear of abandonment. The turning point came during one of Grandma Elena's final hospitalizations, when David spent every night in the waiting room, holding my hand and making sure I ate. "You know," I told him one evening as we sat beside her bed, "you're the first person besides Grandma Elena who has never made me feel like I was too much or not enough." "That's because you're exactly right," he replied simply. "You always have been." We're now expecting our first child, a daughter we've decided to name Elena. The pregnancy has brought up complicated emotions about my own childhood and my relationship with my parents, but it's also filled me with excitement about the kind of mother I want to be. I find myself reading Grandma Elena's old journals, looking for wisdom about raising a strong, confident daughter in a world that doesn't always value women's contributions. Speaking of my parents, they made one final attempt at reconciliation last year when news of my pregnancy became public. They sent flowers to my office with a card expressing their congratulations and their hope that becoming a parent might help me understand their difficult choices from years past. I threw the flowers away without reading the full card. Some wounds heal with time, but some boundaries are necessary for continued health. I've built a beautiful life with people who choose to love me every day, and I won't compromise that for the comfort of others. My business partners often ask me about succession planning, about what will happen to Aurora Energy Solutions when I eventually step back from day-to-day operations. The question used to make me anxious. After all, this company is my life's work. But now I understand that the best legacy isn't one person holding on to control indefinitely. It's building something strong enough to outlast its founder. We've already begun transitioning more responsibility to the next generation of leaders in our company. 3 of our vice presidents are former scholarship recipients from Hope's Light, and our board includes several women who have overcome significant obstacles to achieve success in STEM fields. They bring fresh perspectives and innovative ideas that continually challenge me to grow and evolve. But more than the business success or the philanthropy, I'm proud of the person I've become. I'm proud that I chose love over bitterness, growth over stagnation, hope over despair. I'm proud that I honored Grandma Elena's legacy not just by achieving professional success, but by using that success to lift others up. The scared little girl who arrived at a stranger's house in Vermont couldn't have imagined the woman I would become. But Grandma Elena saw that potential from the very beginning. She saw past the abandonment and pain to the strength and brilliance that lay underneath. I still live in her house, our house, though I've expanded and modernized it considerably. The original cottage now serves as the heart of a larger compound that includes my family's living space, a state-of-the-art research facility, and guest quarters for visiting scholars and scholarship recipients. I've converted her old laboratory into a museum of sorts, preserving her original equipment and notebooks as inspiration for future generations of innovators. Her garden has become a sanctuary where I go to think and remember and plan for the future. I've expanded it to include plants from around the world, creating a living laboratory where visitors can learn about sustainable agriculture and the connection between environmental health and human well-being. David and I were married under the old apple tree where Grandma Elena used to sit and read, and I hope to teach our daughter to garden in the same soil where I learned about patience and growth. Every morning, I touch the sun pendant at my throat and remember her words, "Strong trees grow in strong winds." The winds of my childhood were indeed strong, but they helped me grow roots that go deep and branches that reach high. Now, as I prepare to become a mother myself, I understand that my job is not to shield my daughter from all difficulties, but to give her the tools and love she needs to weather whatever storms life might bring. Recently, I've been working on a book about my journey, not because I think my story is unique, but because I know it's not. There are millions of children who have been abandoned, neglected, or traumatized, and many of them grow up believing that their circumstances define their potential. I want them to know that it's not true. I want them to know that they can choose their own path, that they can build their own family from the people who truly love them, that they can transform their pain into purpose. The book has become a collaborative effort. Maria Santos is helping me research the stories of other scholarship recipients, documenting how education and opportunity can break cycles of poverty and trauma. David is contributing chapters about the science behind renewable energy and how individual actions can contribute to global environmental solutions. Most importantly, I'm including excerpts from Grandma Elena's journals and letters, sharing her wisdom with a broader audience. As I finish telling this story, I'm reminded of something Grandma Elena once told me. The measure of a life is not what you survive, but what you do with the strength that survival gives you. I survived abandonment, loneliness, and the deep wounds that come from parental rejection. But more importantly, I transformed that survival into something meaningful. I built a company that's helping to save our planet. I created a foundation that's changing lives. I became the kind of person who chooses love over fear, hope over despair, giving over taking. That's Grandma Elena's true legacy. Not the money she left me, but the wisdom, the values, and the unshakable belief that we all have the power to choose who we become, regardless of where we started. And that's the legacy I hope to pass on to my daughter, to the next generation of young women who walk through the doors of hope's light, carrying their own dreams and their own determination to change the world. I want them to know that every ending can become a beginning, that every wound can become a source of strength, and that every person has the power to create something beautiful from whatever circumstances they inherit. The sun pendant catches the light as I stand up from my desk, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities tomorrow will bring. Strong trees grow in strong winds, and I am living proof that even the strongest storms can't uproot a tree with deep enough roots and high enough dreams. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the strength to write your own, and may you never forget that you have the power to transform any ending into a new beginning.